Hello, Harrisonburg Youth. I'm back on. I know it's been a while. I apologize for that. I've been crazy busy with schoolwork and just a bunch of ministry. I hope to be sending more videos updating how you can more effectively pray. Be praying for me and just be thinking about ministry outside of the context, how God is using people throughout the world, not just in your church, but in the Church of Africa, and specifically Kenya, where I'm at right now. I was hoping just to take a little time and talk about two things that God has shown me through two different instances, and hopefully it'll be beneficial to you. The first area, which has been a ministry, is a basketball ministry. When I got here five months ago, I joined this basketball team and started playing basketball. And not too long after I started playing, my shoes were actually wearing thin on the bottom. So I started getting these holes in my shoes. You know, I played with these holes in my shoes for a while, and it worked out okay. Here's one of my shoes. I don't know if you can see the hole right there. But of course, during Christmas when I went home, I just got rid of these shoes and picked up some new ones when I was home. And it was that easy. But when I came back, I started playing again in my new sneakers, my new kicks. And after one of the games, I noticed my teammate was taking off his shoes. And he actually had two holes in both of his shoes. You know, and he was taking them off, putting them in his bag, putting in his other shoes. I was like, wow, you know, I just went home and just bought some new shoes, but here's a guy preserving his shoes so they won't be worse off, you know, in the next few months. So poverty has been an issue, you know, that I've had to deal with and really ask some difficult questions. Another instance to do with poverty is doing ministry in Kibera, which is one of the largest slums. It's the second largest slum in Africa. And interacting with some of the people and discovering how they live. They have something in Kibera called flying toilets. Basically, they don't have enough bathrooms where they live, these people. So they go to the bathroom in a plastic bag, basically. So they put their poop and urine in the bag, and then they fling it around, you know, in the bag, and then they just throw it. And then it goes somewhere and it lands, you know, into someone else's house or, you know, in the street, and then that person either has to bury it or just fly it again, you know, because they don't have the sanitation to take it away. You know, like we just go into a toilet and we don't even think about it after that. So issues like this, you know, where you get into a certain context and you have to deal with these kind of things. You know, so I started asking, like, how does God view poverty? How does God view people who are poor? And what should my response be? I came across one passage. I mean, there's plenty of passages that talk about poverty in the Bible. But I just wanted to share one with you guys. It comes from 2 Corinthians 8, verse 9. It says, "For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that you through his poverty might become rich." So Jesus became, in a sense, spiritually poor. You know, he left his glory with his Father in heaven, and he came and he dwelt among us, with sinners, basically. Then also physically, though, you think about where he was born. He was born in a stable because basically they couldn't afford to have a place in a motel, at least what we call a motel. And he grew up, you know, son of a carpenter. He was poor in a sense. So how do we relate to being poor? You know, there's people around us. You don't even have to come to Africa to discover this. But there's people in your midst. You know them in school. We know people. Every culture, every society has poor people. And how are we reaching out to them? How are we like Christ? As it says in Philippians 2, we're supposed to imitate Christ. So from 2 Corinthians 8, verse 10, how are we living that out? How are we becoming poor? How do we relate to the poor? So I find that very challenging, and I imagine you do too. The other thing is that poverty represents our spiritual aspect. There's always a tie to our spiritual poverty, our sin in our lives, to physical poverty. So I think about the instance with the flying toilets. You know, here's someone with their waste, with their garbage, flying their toilets, flying the garbage out of their area so they can live a clean life. But I think sometimes we do that with our spiritual poverty. We take, the sins in our life and we put them to the side. We throw them out of our way. And in a sense, we think that they're gone. But in fact, they're still there, or someone else has to deal with it. We haven't dealt with the issue. So you really haven't accomplished anything. You haven't helped somebody else out, and you haven't dealt with the root issue. So those are just some thoughts that I've been having about poverty. How do you relate to the poor? If you guys going on your mission trip to Mexico, try to be not poor necessarily, but to relate to the poor, to be humbled like Christ, who came and associated with the poor people, that his richness might be glorified through us. And I think that's ultimately why we're supposed to relate to the poor, that Christ might be exalted. People might see a difference. I mean, who wants to be physically poor? Nobody. But when we're helping, when we're serving, when we're living with the poor, what does that show? But it shows Christ within us. It exalts Christ and his supremacy. So I'd encourage you, relate to the poor, and think about your spiritual poverty too. Are you dealing with it, or are you just throwing it to the side? Have you not really dealt with the issue? So those are just some thoughts. If you want to contact me on Facebook, I'd love to hear from you. What you have for me to pray for you, the youth group. And I can tell you how you can be praying for me, be praying for different people that I interact with. So I love you guys, and stay in touch.